My name is Lily Cooper. I'm 31 years old, and my own sister humiliated me in front of everyone. Then I proved her dead wrong. You won't believe what happened at my mother's anniversary celebration when my sister Rachel stood in front of 50 people and told them I was a complete failure who would never succeed at anything. What she didn't know in that moment was that her cruel words would become the fuel for the biggest transformation of my entire life. Before we dive into this story, I need you to drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. New York, London, Miami, anywhere in the world. Stay with me until the end because when I came back months later with undeniable proof, the look on her face was absolutely priceless. If you've ever been betrayed by someone close to you, hit that subscribe button right now because this story is going to resonate with you deeply. Have you ever trusted someone with your dreams only to have them tear you down in public? That's exactly what my own flesh and blood did to me, and I'm going to share every detail of how I turned that pain into power. Smash that like button if you think family should lift you up, not tear you down, and let me know in the comments if you've experienced something similar. This community is built on people who understand what it's like to rise from humiliation. This isn't just another sibling rivalry story. This is about the moment your closest ally becomes your worst enemy without any warning. When family humiliates you publicly, they don't just damage your reputation. They destroy the one place where you thought you'd always be safe and supported. Tonight, you'll hear how silence became my greatest weapon, how evidence spoke louder than any argument ever could, and how patience gave me the perfect moment for justice. I'm going to walk you through every painful step, every moment I wanted to give up, and exactly how I proved everyone wrong. By the end of this video, you'll understand why revenge served cold is the sweetest kind. My sister Rachel and I weren't always at war with each other. We actually grew up as partners trying to survive our parents' impossible expectations together. Our childhood was filled with constant pressure to be perfect, to achieve more, to never make mistakes or show weakness in front of anyone. Rachel dealt with this pressure by becoming exactly what our parents wanted, the obedient daughter who got perfect grades, followed every rule, and never questioned authority. I handled it differently. I asked questions. I took creative risks. I chose paths that felt authentic even if they weren't traditional or safe. While Rachel was praised constantly for being the responsible one, I was always labeled as the unpredictable one who made our parents nervous. The distance between us grew slowly over the years, so gradually that I didn't even notice it happening until it was too late. When we were teenagers, she'd make small comments about my choices. "Are you really wearing that?" Or, "Maybe you should study more instead of drawing." That seemed harmless at the time. As adults, those comments evolved into something darker and more calculated, disguised as sisterly concern, but dripping with judgment and superiority. Every time I shared good news about my freelance graphic design business, she'd respond with backhanded compliments like, "That's cute, but when are you getting a real job with benefits?" Our parents would nod along, agreeing that I needed to be more practical, more stable, more like Rachel. I started dreading family gatherings because I knew every conversation would somehow turn into a comparison where I always came up short. What I didn't understand back then was that my independence threatened the entire identity she'd built for herself as the successful daughter. She needed me to fail so she could continue being the golden child, the one who made all the right choices and deserved all the praise. Every risk I took that paid off, every client who hired me, every small victory in my business, it all chipped away at her narrative. The tension between us became suffocating, but I kept trying to maintain the relationship because she was my sister, and I believed family was supposed to support each other. I ignored the warning signs, dismissed the passive-aggressive comments, and convinced myself that deep down she wanted me to succeed. But I was wrong, so incredibly, painfully wrong. And I was about to find out just how much she wanted to see me destroyed. The night everything fell apart was my mother's 60th anniversary celebration, and it was supposed to be a beautiful family gathering with close friends and relatives. Rachel had volunteered to give a speech about family, about how grateful we all were for our mother's love and support throughout the years. I remember sitting at my table, feeling actually hopeful for once that maybe this event would be different, that maybe we could all just enjoy being together. If you're still watching, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what happens next is going to shock you, and I need you here for the entire journey. Have you ever trusted someone completely only to have them betray you in the worst possible way? Drop a comment and let me know because I want to hear your stories too. The moment Rachel took the microphone, I could feel something shift in the atmosphere, but I couldn't have predicted what was coming next. She started her speech normally, thanking everyone for coming and talking about family bonds, but then her eyes locked onto me with this cold expression I'd never seen before. You know, Mom always taught us to be honest, she said, her voice sweet but with an edge that made my stomach drop. Then she launched into what can only be described as a calculated assassination of my character. She told everyone about my failed business attempts, my unstable income, how I was still trying to figure out what to do with my life at 31. She painted me as irresponsible, unreliable, someone who made poor decisions and refused to grow up, all while standing at a podium in front of 50 people who I respected. What made it even worse was how she delivered it. Not with anger or obvious cruelty, but with this fake concern that made it sound like she was worried about me. I just hope Harper finally finds some direction soon, she said, shaking her head sadly while everyone nodded along in agreement. The room didn't gasp in shock or come to my defense. Instead, they sat there in this uncomfortable silence that felt like validation of everything she'd just said. My face burned with shame, my hands trembled under the table, and I couldn't even look up because I knew if I did, I'd see pity and agreement in everyone's eyes. That moment, sitting there while my own sister destroyed my reputation with a smile on her face, changed something fundamental inside me, and I knew right then that words would never be enough to respond to what she'd just done. I forced myself to smile through the rest of that dinner, mechanically eating food I couldn't taste, and nodding at conversations I couldn't really hear. Every time someone looked at me, I felt their judgment weighing on my shoulders, their silent agreement with everything Rachel had said about my failures. My mother came over after the speeches and patted my hand with this sympathetic look that made me want to scream, saying, "Maybe Rachel has a point, sweetheart. Maybe it's time to think about stability." Even my own mother believed the narrative Rachel had created, and in that moment, I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my entire life. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and tears I refused to let fall until I was safely behind closed doors. The second I walked into my apartment, the dam broke and I collapsed on my bathroom floor, sobbing so hard my entire body shook. I replayed every word Rachel had said, every face in that audience nodding along, every moment of humiliation that I couldn't escape no matter how tightly I closed my eyes. The worst part wasn't even the public embarrassment. It was the betrayal, the knowledge that my own sister had planned this, had thought about how to hurt me most effectively, and had executed it perfectly. She hadn't lost her temper or said something in the heat of the moment. She'd deliberately chosen to destroy me in front of everyone who mattered. But somewhere in the middle of that breakdown, between the crying and the anger and the crushing weight of shame, something inside me shifted. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was quiet, like steel slowly forming under intense pressure. I realized that breaking down completely would only prove Rachel right, would only confirm everything she'd said about me being unstable and directionless. So instead of letting this destroy me, I made a decision right there on that cold bathroom floor. I would let my success speak louder than her words ever could. I wouldn't defend myself with explanations or arguments, because words clearly meant nothing to these people. I would show them undeniable proof that everything Rachel said was a lie, and I would do it in a way that left absolutely no room for doubt or dismissal. The next morning, I woke up with my eyes swollen from crying and my dress still on, wrinkled and uncomfortable against my skin. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. Defeated, broken, exactly what Rachel wanted me to be. For a moment, I considered calling her, demanding an apology, maybe even confronting her in front of our parents to make them see what she'd done. But then I realized something important. Defending myself with words would be completely useless because they'd already made up their minds about who I was. Rachel had planted seeds of doubt about my capabilities for years, and her speech at the party was just the final confirmation of a narrative she'd been building all along. I thought about all the revenge stories I'd heard before, the ones where people clapped back immediately with angry social media posts or dramatic confrontations, But those approaches never really worked because they made you look reactive, emotional, unstable. Exactly what Rachel had accused me of being. People don't believe what you say when you're defending yourself. They believe what you show them when you're not even trying to prove anything. I had nothing concrete to show yet. No undeniable evidence of success that would make her accusations look ridiculous. My business was doing okay, but okay wasn't enough to completely dismantle the story she'd told about my failures. I needed something bigger, something so impressive that even my harshest critics couldn't dismiss it. So I made a decision right there, standing in my wrinkled dress with mascara streaks down my face. I would go completely silent. No explanations, no defenses, no desperate attempts to change anyone's mind with words they wouldn't believe anyway. Instead, I would pour every ounce of energy into building something so successful, so undeniable, so impressive, that the results would speak louder than Rachel ever could. I wouldn't tell anyone what I was working on, wouldn't post updates on social media, wouldn't give my family any hints about my progress. I would work in complete silence, documenting everything carefully, building a foundation of proof that nobody could question or minimize when the time came. And when I finally had that proof, contracts, testimonials, financial statements, awards, I would place it in front of Rachel and watch her realize that everything she said about me was a lie. The first thing I did was stop going to family events completely, and I mean every single one of them. Birthdays, holidays, Sunday dinners, all of it. My mother called constantly asking why I was avoiding everyone, and I gave her the same calm answer every time. "I'm just really busy with work right now, Mom." She'd sigh and say something about how I was being too sensitive about Rachel's comments, that my sister was just trying to help me see reality. I didn't argue or try to explain because there was no point. She wouldn't understand until I had proof she couldn't deny. If you're still watching this story, hit that subscribe button right now because the transformation that's coming is absolutely incredible. Have you ever cut off toxic family members to focus on yourself? Drop a comment and let me know your experience. I stopped checking social media obsessively, stopped comparing my progress to everyone else's highlight reels, stopped seeking validation from people who had already decided I wasn't good enough. Every hour I used to spend at awkward family dinners or scrolling through posts that made me feel inadequate, I now spent building my business with laser focus. I reached out to potential clients I'd been too scared to approach before. I upgraded my skills with online courses in advanced digital marketing strategies. I redesigned my entire portfolio to showcase my best work. Nobody knew what I was doing because I deliberately kept everything private. No Instagram stories about my progress, no LinkedIn posts celebrating small wins, no casual mentions of new projects during conversations with friends. The isolation was harder than I expected, and there were nights when I questioned whether cutting everyone off was the right decision. I'd see photos from family gatherings I wasn't invited to anymore, pictures of Rachel smiling with our parents, captions about how grateful they were for real family who stayed close. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, but I used that pain as fuel to work even harder. I created a folder on my computer labeled Evidence, where I saved every positive email from clients, every completed contract, every payment confirmation, every testimonial praising my work. I wasn't collecting this information for my own ego. I was building a case, preparing for the moment when I would need undeniable proof that everything Rachel said about me was completely wrong. 3 months into my silent journey, I hit a wall that nearly broke me completely and made me question if Rachel had been right all along. I'd been working on landing a major contract with Thompson & Associates, a prestigious marketing firm that could change everything for my business. I'd spent weeks preparing the perfect proposal, researching their needs, crafting a strategy that I knew would work beautifully for them. When I finally submitted my proposal and had the meeting with their director, I felt confident for the first time since that horrible night at my mother's party. But 2 days later, I got the email. They'd chosen someone else, someone with more established credentials and a larger portfolio. That rejection hit me harder than I expected, because it wasn't just about losing one client. It felt like confirmation that maybe I wasn't good enough after all. I sat in my apartment that night with a glass of wine I didn't even want to drink, staring at my laptop screen and feeling the weight of every failure, every setback, every doubt pressing down on my chest. Rachel's voice echoed in my head, saying all those things about me never making it, about being directionless and unstable. For the first time since I'd started this journey, I allowed myself to consider the possibility that she might be right. Maybe I was delusional. Maybe I was chasing something impossible. Maybe I should just give up and get a regular corporate job like she'd always suggested. But then something shifted in that moment of darkness, something that would become the turning point of my entire story. I realized that Rachel hadn't humiliated me at that party because I was failing. She did it because she was afraid I might actually succeed. If I was truly hopeless, truly directionless, truly destined to fail, she wouldn't have needed to publicly destroy my reputation. Her cruelty wasn't about helping me see reality. It was about keeping me in a box where she could control the narrative and maintain her position as the successful sister. That realization gave me a new kind of energy, a defiant determination that pushed me off my couch and back to my laptop. I wasn't going to quit. Not when she'd tried so hard to make sure I would. 2 weeks after that crushing rejection, I got an email that changed everything and proved that persistence pays off in ways you never expect. A woman named Jennifer Park, the marketing director for Sterling Enterprises, had somehow found my portfolio online and wanted to discuss a potential collaboration. Sterling Enterprises was one of the biggest retail companies in the region, exactly the kind of client I'd been dreaming about but thought was beyond my reach. I almost deleted the email thinking it was spam because opportunities like this didn't just appear in my inbox without warning. But I responded professionally, we scheduled a call, and within an hour of talking to Jennifer, I knew this was the breakthrough I'd been working toward. Jennifer was impressed with my portfolio, but even more impressed with my approach to digital strategy and my understanding of their target audience. She explained that they'd been unhappy with their current marketing agency and were looking for someone fresh, creative, and hungry to prove themselves. We talked for almost 2 hours about their needs, their goals, their challenges, and by the end of that conversation, she offered me a 6-month contract worth more money than I'd made in the entire previous year. I remember sitting in my apartment after that call, hands shaking, tears streaming down my face, barely able to believe this was actually happening. This wasn't just a client. This was validation, proof that everything I'd been building in silence was real and valuable. The success with Sterling Enterprises opened doors I didn't even know existed, and suddenly opportunities were coming faster than I could keep up with them. Other companies heard about my work through industry connections and reached out for consultations. My portfolio started getting attention from marketing publications, and I was invited to speak at a regional conference about innovative digital strategies. I documented everything meticulously. Every contract I signed, every testimonial from satisfied clients, every award nomination, every speaking engagement, every financial milestone. I wasn't collecting this evidence for social media or for my own ego. I was building an undeniable case that would eventually be placed in front of Rachel and everyone who'd nodded along to her lies at that party. 6 months after that devastating night at my mother's party, I sat at my desk looking at a leather folder I'd carefully prepared, and I knew the time had finally come. Inside that folder was everything. Signed contracts with major clients, including Sterling Enterprises, bank statements showing my business income had tripled, testimonial letters from industry leaders praising my work, invitations to speak at conferences, and even a feature article about my success in a respected marketing publication. This wasn't just evidence. It was undeniable proof that everything Rachel had said about me was a lie, and I'd spent months making sure there was no way anyone could dismiss or minimize what I'd accomplished. Make sure you're subscribed because what happens next is the moment you've been waiting for. And trust me, it's going to be worth it. I didn't want revenge in the traditional angry sense. I wanted restoration of truth, and those are two completely different things with different motivations. Revenge is about hurting someone because they hurt you, but restoration is about correcting a false narrative with facts that can't be argued with. I could have confronted Rachel privately, sent her the evidence, and demanded an apology, but that wouldn't have achieved anything meaningful. She'd humiliated me publicly in front of 50 people who mattered to both of us, and if I was going to correct that narrative, it needed to happen in the same public way with the same audience. So when my mother sent out an invitation for Thanksgiving dinner at her house, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I RSVP'd yes for the first time in 6 months, and I could practically hear my mother's relief through the text message she sent back. "I'm so glad you're finally coming back to family events," she wrote. "Rachel will be so happy to see you. She's been worried about you." I didn't respond to that message because there was nothing to say yet. I spent the week before Thanksgiving preparing my presentation carefully, printing documents on high-quality paper, organizing everything in chronological order to tell the complete story of my transformation. I practiced what I would say, keeping it calm and factual rather than emotional or accusatory. This wasn't about making a scene. It was about placing truth on the table and letting it speak for itself. Thanksgiving dinner was exactly as I remembered. My mother's dining room filled with the same relatives who'd witnessed my humiliation 6 months earlier, the same formal table settings, the same traditional meal. Rachel was there looking confident and comfortable, laughing with our cousins about something I couldn't hear from across the room. When she saw me walk in, her expression flickered with surprise before settling into that fake warmth she was so good at performing. "Lily, I'm so glad you finally decided to join us again," she said, hugging me like nothing had happened. "We've all been so worried about you hiding away for months." I smiled politely and took my seat at the table, placing my leather folder on the empty chair beside me. Dinner conversation flowed normally for the first hour, people asking about jobs and holidays and sharing stories about their lives. Nobody asked me about my business, probably assuming I was still struggling the way Rachel had described at that party. My mother kept giving me these concerned looks like she was worried I might cause drama or break down emotionally. Rachel dominated the conversation as usual, talking about her recent promotion at work and the vacation she was planning. I ate quietly, responded politely when spoken to, and waited for the perfect moment that I knew would come. That moment arrived when my father stood up to make his traditional Thanksgiving speech about gratitude and family. After my father finished speaking and everyone applauded, I stood up calmly and said, "I'd like to say something too, if that's okay." The room went quiet, and I could see Rachel's face tighten with barely concealed annoyance at being interrupted. I didn't give a speech. Instead, I picked up my leather folder, walked around the table, and placed it directly in front of Rachel. 6 months ago, at Mom's anniversary party, you stood up and told everyone here that I was a failure, that I was directionless, that I would never make anything of myself, I said, my voice steady and clear. I didn't defend myself that night because I knew words wouldn't change anyone's mind. So I decided to let my results speak instead. Everything in that folder proves that every single thing you said about me was a lie. Rachel's face went through a series of expressions in rapid succession: confusion, then recognition, then something that looked like panic as she opened the folder. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled out the first document, a signed contract with Sterling Enterprises showing a 6-figure deal with my name at the bottom. My mother leaned over to look, her mouth falling open in genuine shock. And then my father moved closer to see what had everyone's attention. The entire table went silent except for the sound of papers being shuffled, as Rachel flipped through page after page of undeniable proof. Contract after contract, testimonial after testimonial, bank statements showing income numbers that even surprised me when I saw them printed out together like that. My Aunt Margaret was the first to speak, her voice filled with amazement as she read over my mother's shoulder. "Lily, is this real? Did you really land all these major clients in just 6 months?" I nodded calmly, watching Rachel's face turn pale as she realized what this meant. She tried to minimize it immediately, her voice shaking slightly as she said, "Well, anyone can get lucky with a few clients. That doesn't mean it's sustainable or impressive in the long term." But her words sounded hollow and desperate, especially when my cousin picked up the marketing magazine article featuring my work and started reading it out loud to everyone. The same people who had nodded along to my humiliation now sat in uncomfortable silence, unable to deny the evidence literally sitting on the table in front of them. What struck me most was watching the realization spread across everyone's faces, not just that I'd succeeded, but that Rachel had deliberately lied about me in front of all of them. My mother's expression shifted from shock to something that looked like shame as she understood what her oldest daughter had done to her youngest. My father cleared his throat awkwardly and said, "Lily, "This is incredible. We had no idea you were doing so well." I let that comment hang in the air for a moment before responding. "You had no idea because none of you asked. And when Rachel told you I was failing, you all believed her without question." The truth of that statement settled over the table like a heavy blanket, and nobody could meet my eyes except Rachel, who was staring at me with barely contained fury. I stayed standing at the head of the table, my voice calm but firm as I addressed not just Rachel but everyone who had witnessed my humiliation. 6 months ago, Rachel stood up at Mom's party and told everyone here that I was a failure, that I was irresponsible, that I would never amount to anything. She didn't do that because she was concerned about me. She did it because my success threatened the story she'd been telling herself about being the only capable sister in this family. Rachel tried to interrupt, starting to say something about how I was twisting her words, but I held up my hand and continued. "Let me finish, because you had your chance to speak and nobody stopped you, so now it's my turn to tell the truth." I looked directly at Rachel as I spoke, watching her squirm under the weight of her own lies being exposed. "You've spent years making small comments designed to undermine my confidence, disguising your jealousy as concern, planting doubts in my mind and in everyone else's mind about whether I was good enough. That night at Mom's party wasn't an intervention or honest feedback. It was a calculated attack, meant to destroy my reputation so you could maintain your position as the golden child who always does everything right." The silence in that room was deafening, and I could see several relatives nodding slightly as they remembered Rachel's years of subtle put-downs that they'd dismissed as sisterly teasing. But here's what you didn't understand. You didn't humiliate me because I was failing. You humiliated me because you were afraid I might actually succeed. Rachel finally found her voice, standing up abruptly and saying with forced confidence, "This is ridiculous. I've always supported you. I was just trying to help you see reality." But her defense sounded weak even to her own ears, especially with all that evidence still spread across the table. I pulled out one final document from the folder, screenshots of text messages she'd sent to our cousin months earlier. Messages where she explicitly said she hoped my business would fail so I'd finally get a real job and stop embarrassing the family. Our cousin had forwarded them to me weeks ago, guilty about not speaking up sooner. I placed those screenshots on top of the pile and said simply, "The truth doesn't need to be loud, Rachel. It just needs to be undeniable. And right now, everyone here can see exactly who you really are." I walked directly to where Rachel was sitting and placed the folder on the table in front of her, not saying a word at first, just letting the weight of that moment settle over the entire room. She looked at the folder, then at me, confusion and something that might have been fear flickering across her face. 6 months ago at Mom's anniversary party, you stood in front of everyone here and told them I was a failure, that I was directionless, that I would never succeed at anything meaningful, I said, my voice steady and calm. I didn't defend myself that night because I knew words wouldn't change minds that were already made up, so I decided to let my results speak for me instead. I opened the folder slowly, deliberately, and pulled out the first document. A signed contract with Sterling Enterprises worth more than Rachel made in an entire year at her corporate job. My mother reached over Rachel's shoulder to see what I'd placed on the table, and I watched her eyes widen as she read the numbers and the company name. "Lily, is this real?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I pulled out another document, then another. Testimonial letters from CEOs praising my work, bank statements showing my business income had tripled in 6 months, invitations to speak at industry conferences, a feature article about my success in a respected marketing publication, page after page of undeniable proof that everything Rachel had said about me was not just wrong, but a deliberate lie. Rachel's face went from pale to red as she flipped through the documents, her hands shaking slightly, and I could see her mind racing to find some way to dismiss or minimize what was right in front of her. She finally spoke, her voice tight and defensive. "Well, anyone can get lucky with a few good clients. It doesn't mean you've actually built something sustainable or impressive." Us? But her words sounded hollow and desperate, especially when my father picked up one of the contracts and started reading the terms out loud to the table. The same people who had sat in comfortable agreement while she destroyed my reputation now shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unable to look me in the eye. realizing they'd participated in something cruel and unjust. My Aunt Margaret cleared her throat and said quietly, "Rachel, I think you owe your sister an apology." And several other relatives nodded in agreement, their expressions showing shame and regret for believing Rachel's lies without question. Rachel stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, trying to regain control of a situation that was slipping away from her completely. "I was just trying to help you see reality, Lily. I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice rising with defensive anger. "Maybe I was harsh, but someone needed to tell you the truth about your situation, and clearly it motivated you to finally get serious about your work." I let her finish that pathetic excuse before responding, and when I spoke, my voice was calm but filled with steel. "You didn't tell me the truth, Rachel. You told everyone a lie because my success threatened the identity you'd built as the only capable sister in this family." I pulled out one more document that I'd been saving for this exact moment. Printed screenshots of text messages Rachel had sent to our cousin Emily 3 months earlier. Messages where she explicitly said she hoped my business would fail, where she mocked my ambitions and said I was delusional for thinking I could compete with real professionals. Emily had forwarded them to me weeks ago, feeling guilty about staying silent, and I'd kept them as insurance in case Rachel tried to claim she'd always supported me. I placed those screenshots on top of the pile of contracts and testimonials, and watched Rachel's face go completely white as she realized what I'd just exposed. "You didn't humiliate me because you cared about me or wanted to help me. You did it because you needed me to fail so you could continue being the golden child everyone praised." The silence that followed was absolute, the kind of silence where you can hear people breathing and shifting in their seats uncomfortably. My mother looked at Rachel with an expression I'd never seen before, disappointment mixed with betrayal, and my father just shook his head slowly. "Rachel, how could you do this to your own sister?" my mother asked, her voice breaking slightly. Rachel tried to defend herself, stammering something about how I was misinterpreting everything, but nobody was buying it anymore. I gathered up my documents, placed them back in the folder, and said one final thing before I left. "I don't need an apology from you, Rachel, because your opinion stopped mattering to me the moment I realized you were more invested in my failure than my success. I just needed everyone here to know the truth, and now they do." I walked out of that house with my head held high, leaving behind a family that finally understood exactly who had been lying to them all along. I walked out of my parents' house that night feeling lighter than I'd felt in years, like I'd finally put down a weight I'd been carrying since childhood. The cold December air hit my face as I stood on the porch for a moment, listening to the muffled voices inside still processing what had just happened. I didn't feel triumphant or vindictive. I felt free, liberated from the need to prove myself to people who had never really wanted to see me succeed in the first place. That night taught me something profound about family betrayal. It hurts differently because it comes from people who are supposed to be your safe place, your unconditional support system, your biggest cheerleaders regardless of circumstances. When that safety is destroyed, it changes you in ways that success and achievement can never fully heal. But here's what else I learned through this entire painful experience. Your value as a person isn't determined by the people who refuse to see it, and your worth isn't diminished by those who try to tear you down out of their own insecurity and fear. Rachel's lies about me said everything about her character and nothing about my actual capabilities or potential. The 6 months I spent in isolation, working obsessively, building something real, that wasn't just about proving her wrong, though that was certainly satisfying. It was about proving to myself that I could trust my own vision even when everyone around me doubted it, that I could build a life on my own terms without needing external validation from people who would never give it freely. Looking back now, I'm almost grateful for that horrible night at Mom's anniversary party, because it forced me to stop seeking approval from people who were never going to give it. It pushed me to become self-reliant in ways I never would have been if my family had supported me unconditionally from the beginning. The relationships I've built since then, with clients who respect my work, with colleagues who appreciate my perspective, with friends who celebrate my wins instead of diminishing them, those relationships are built on mutual respect rather than obligation or blood relation, and that foundation is so much stronger than anything I had before. I'll see you in the next video, and I can't wait to share more stories about turning pain into power and betrayal into boundaries that protect your peace. So after hearing my entire story, I want to ask you something important. What would you have done in my place? Would you have confronted Rachel immediately after that party? Or would you have done what I did and let your success speak for itself? Drop your honest opinion in the comments because I genuinely want to know if you think I handled this the right way or if you would have approached it differently. There's no right or wrong answer here. Family betrayal is complicated and messy, and everyone processes it in their own way based on their own experiences and values. Here's another question I've been thinking about a lot since that night. Do you believe revenge ever truly brings peace, or does it just create more anger and division in the long run? Some people told me I should have just moved on and forgiven Rachel without confronting her publicly, that holding on to resentment only hurts yourself. But I don't see what I did as revenge. I see it as restoration of truth, as setting the record straight so I could move forward without carrying the weight of her lies. What's your take on this? Was I justified in exposing her the way she exposed me? Or should I have taken the high road and stayed silent? Let me know in the comments, because these are questions I'm still wrestling with myself. If you want more stories like this about turning family betrayal into personal triumph, about setting boundaries with toxic people, and about proving wrong everyone who doubted you, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. I share stories every week about revenge, justice, family drama, and the complicated dynamics that shape our lives and force us to grow in unexpected ways. And if this story resonated with you, if you've experienced something similar with your own family, I want you to know you're not alone. There's an entire community here who understands what you're going through. Don't miss the next video where I'll share an even more intense story about what happened when my family tried to come back into my life after I became successful. Trust me, you won't want to miss that one.